Hope you're good. Hope you're fantastic. So today we'll be doing plant response. Without wasting any time, let's get into it. So what are plant hormones? They are not necessarily hormones because they work where they are produced. Remember, traditional hormones are produced in one place and they work in another place. Hence, we don't consider them as hormones, right? They're not true hormones because they work where they are produced. Like for example, auxins. Auxins are produced at the tip of the stem and they work there. Like they function in that area. So they don't function in any area outside of where they are produced. Right. So we sometimes refer to them as plant growth substances because they are not true hormones. Right. So what are the functions of these hormones? Obviously, these hormones they allow plants to respond to the external environment or to respond to the stimuli. So, what is the stimuli? The stimuli is the change outside the environment, right? It's the change that's happening outside the environment or in the external environment. So, let's look at their function. So, their function. So, these hormones they allow plants to bloom at an appropriate time, right? Number two, they allow plants to grow towards light source. So we'll get into that and explain how do they grow towards a stimulus, the light stimulus. Okay, number three, they allow seeds to germinate at the appropriate time. So germinate is when the seeds sprout. That's when they grow, it's when they sprout. Okay. Number four, the last one, they induce dormancy in plants at an appropriate time. So dormancy is dormant, right? It's when plants are in their dormant state. They're not growing, they're not producing fruits, they're not producing flowers, they're just dormant, right? Okay, now let's get into plant hormones. So we have three plant hormones we're going to focus on. So we have auxins, gibberellins, and abscisic acids. So we're going to look at their functions individually. So what are their functions? Let's look at their individual functions. Okay, let's look at auxins. So auxins, they stimulate cell division. Which cell division? Mitosis, right? So they stimulate mitosis. Remember, what's the function of mitosis? The function of mitosis is to stimulate growth. And it so happens that the role or the functions of the auxins is to stimulate growth in a plant, in certain parts of the plant, right? Because when it comes to roots, it inhibits growth when it comes to roots, right? Under specific circumstances. And we'll explain those circumstances. Okay, number two, it allows cell elongation. So cell elongation is the growth in the stem length. What causes the cell elongation? What causes the cell elongation is mitosis. Okay, now let's go to the third one. So they allow the development of fruits. The development of fruits is just self-explanatory. Okay, number four, the abscission of leaves and fruits. So abscission is when the leaves are falling off the tree. When the leaves and fruits are falling off the tree, right? Let's go to the next one. The development of adventitious roots in stem cutting. So they stimulate the development of adventitious roots. What are adventitious roots? So adventitious roots are roots that grow anyway except the roots themselves. So they can grow on the stem, they can grow on the leaves, right? They can grow anyway except for the roots. And they are very different from traditional roots, right? So those are the roots. So they stimulate the development of adventitious roots. Also, tropic movements in stem and roots. So they stimulate tropic movement. Tropic movement is when plants are responding to a certain stimulus, right? Okay, let's go to the final function of auxin. So the final function of auxin is that apical dominance, they stimulate apical dominance. It suppresses the growth of the lateral branches or lateral buds, right? So the concentration of auxin inhibits, right, the growth of lateral branches. I'm sure you've seen this when you look at a tree. The more closer you get to the tip of the stem, because that's where the auxins are produced, the less lateral branches you get there, right? Which shows that auxins, they inhibit, right, the growth of lateral branches, or you can say lateral buds. Okay, now let's go to the role of gibberellins. So gibberellins, they stimulate cell elongation or stem elongation, right? They share that function with the auxin, right? Cell elongation, stem elongation rather, is when the stem grows. So to elongate is to grow. Okay, let's go to the second function. The second function is root growth. Root growth. So they stimulate the roots to grow. Okay. Number three, they stimulate the germination of seeds. Remember, we said germination is when the seeds sprout, right? It's when the seed starts to come out, a radicle, which is which are roots when a seed is still sprouting, right? And also a plume, right? Which is a stem, it's a young stem. So when a seed is starting to germinate or starting to sprout, we call that germination. Okay, the last point promotes flowering. So it promotes flowers in a plant. Okay, let's move on. Let's go to the role of the abscisic acid. The abscisic acid does the opposite of what the auxins or the gibberellins do, right? It does the opposite. So whereas the gibberellins and the auxins will stimulate growth, the abscisic acid will inhibit growth or it will prevent growth, right? So this hormone most of the time is produced or it's secreted by plants during winter, where plants are not general growing in general. Where they are not growing in general. So it causes the plants, number two, it causes the plants to become dormant in winter. So it causes the plant not to grow, not to produce fruits, not to do anything in winter, right? And also it promotes the abscission in leaves and fruits. Remember, we said the abscission is when the leaves are falling off and the fruits are falling off. You see this phenomena during autumn most of the time, right? So what triggers this abscisic acid? Lack of water or stress stimulates the production of abscisic acid. Why does it stimulate the production of abscisic acid? Because in winter, there's not a lot of water, right? Or in places where there's not a lot of water, a plant secretes a lot of this hormone. Because that's a signal to the plant not to produce, right? Because it uses minerals it gets from water in order to uh, conduct certain processes within it, right? Okay, the last point is this. It causes the closing of the stomata when the plant wilts, right? So the stomata, I'm sure you did this in grade 10. So the stomata is like a gate that allows water to diffuse into the plant, right? Or it allows water to get into the plant. So this is the stomata. Can you see here it's opened? Let me just draw it. Can you see here before the introduction of the abscisic acid it's open. After the introduction of the abscisic acid, the stomata closes. So it means that the stomata is now not is allowing less water or not allowing water at all, right? Or it's allowing less nutrients during that time where the stomata is closed. It's like a gate of a plant. So the stomata is like a gateway of the plant where it allows minerals to get into the plant. Okay. Okay, let's go to auxins. So auxins, how are auxins used in agriculture? So auxins are used as to kill weeds, right? So what are weeds? Weeds are any plants that compete for resources with other plants that are meant for selling, right? So if I'm growing corn and there are plants that are growing besides corn and competing for resources with corn, it means that I'll consider those plants weeds, right? Because they're competing with the corn that I'm trying to grow with regards to resources. So we'll consider those as weeds. So in agriculture, they use auxins as herbicides. So herbicides, it means these are hormones, or sometimes it could be chemicals, right? that are sprayed on weeds in order to kill them. So they're weed controllers, like they control weeds. So that's a herbicide, right? There are also pesticides. They control pests. So whenever they say herbicides, they control weeds, right? Okay. So let's go to the advantages of auxins in agriculture or hormone weed killers. The advantages of hormone weed killers as opposed to using chemicals, right? Because auxins are not chemicals; they're just hormones, right? So what's the advantage of using hormones instead of chemicals as herbicides? They are not toxic to animals and humans. Imagine if a farmer sprays chemicals on plants. It means that those chemicals will later then affect our health. But if they're using hormone weed killers, it means that these weed hormone killers, they are not toxic to animals or humans, because they will eventually sell their produce to humans. And also there's no longer a need for weeding the garden or physically weeding the garden. You can just spray auxins right on these weeds, then they will die. Okay, now let's go to phototropism. So what is phototropism? So it's when a plant is growing towards light or is responding towards the light stimulus, right? It's when a plant grows towards light or it's responding to a light stimulus, right? Okay, now let's look at this first picture. As you can see that a plant is exposed to uniform light. So it means the plant is exposed to equal lighting. Uniform means equal lighting, right? So it gets light from all sides, from all sides. Does that make sense? So it gets light all around. So the light is distributed equally or evenly, right? So auxins are produced at the tip of the stem. Just highlight the tip of the stem. So auxins are produced here at the tip of the stem, here, right? And we call the tip of the stem an apical bud. We call the tip of the stem an apical bud, right? So when plants are exposed to uniform light, the auxins they diffuse going down or they go down or distributed evenly going down. So they will be distributed evenly going down because they're exposed to uh, uniform light, right? Going down, which will cause this plant to grow vertically or upwards. So it will cause this plant to grow upwards because it's it's receiving auxins all around, right? It will cause the plant to grow upwards. Does that make sense? Okay, now let's go to the second picture. This one, second picture. So what happens when a plant is exposed to unilateral light? Unilateral light means it gets light from one side, right? So it means it gets light from one side. As you can see, that light is coming from one direction, right? From one direction, which is the right hand side. Right, so we'll call the side where light is coming from the right hand side and call the other side where there's no exposure to light, the left hand side, right? So what happens is this, the auxins are sensitive to light. So auxins are sensitive to light. So what would they do? They'll run away from the light and they'll go to the left hand side or the darker side. We can call it the darker side, right? So they'll come here to the darker side. So they'll diffuse or run away to the darker side. As you can see, they're concentrated in the darker side, right? And remember, what's the function of the auxins? The functions of the auxins is to cause the stem to grow, to elongate. So it means that the darker side will grow more than the lighter side, or the left-hand side will grow more than the right-hand side. And when the left-hand side grows more than the right-hand side, what will happen? It will cause this plant to bend, bend towards the light. And you see that the stem is bending towards the light, right? So the stem will bend towards the light because the auxins are now concentrated on the left hand side or the darker side. So the darker side will grow faster than the lighter side. I hope that makes a lot of sense. We call this phenomenon positive phototropism. Why is it positive phototropism? Because the stem is responding or is bending towards the light or is responding to light, right? We call this phenomenon positive phototropism. So don't forget it. Now let's look at the roots or geotropism. Geotropism. So geotropism is when the plant is responding to gravity, mainly the roots, right? So remember, the auxins, when it comes to the roots, right? So the auxins are produced at the tip of the roots. They are produced at the tip of the roots. Can you see the tip? They're produced at the tip of the roots, right? They're produced at the tip of the roots and they go upwards. They diffuse going upwards, right? They diffuse going upwards, which causes the roots to grow going downwards. It causes the roots to grow going downwards. So it's opposite to what the stem does. It's opposite to what the auxins do with regards to the stem, right? So remember, when it comes to the roots, auxins are produced at the tip of the roots and they diffuse or they move going upwards, causing the roots to grow going downwards. But what happens when a plant is placed horizontally? So when a plant is placed horizontally, it means that the auxins, as you can see, the auxins here, the auxins will go to the bottom side. Is that the right term? Let me just look for another term. It means that they'll go to the lower side. Why? Because they're attracted to gravity. So gravity will pull the auxin to the lower side, right? So it will go to the lower side. Does that make sense? And when auxins go to the lower side, when auxins go to the lower side, what happens? And this is one thing you should know about auxins with regards to geotropism. So auxins, right, they inhibit growth when it comes to the roots. So it means that the roots, the lower side will grow slower than the upper side. So it means that this lower side, can you see it here? There's a concentration of auxins. Why? Because of gravity. So it means that the lower side will grow slower as compared to, draw this, as compared to the upper side, right? Causing the plant to bend. As you can see, this upper side is growing faster than the lower side, right? Causing the plant to bend, right, towards gravity or to point towards gravity. Can you see with the plant is bending towards gravity or the roots are bending towards gravity? So we call this what? Positive geotropism. Call it positive geotropism. Okay, we're done with the roots. Let's focus on the stem. So look at the stem. Remember, this is a stem. Auxins are attracted to the lower side, right? Why are they attracted to the lower side? Because of gravity. So they're attracted to the lower side because of gravity. So this is gravity. So look at the black points here so that you can see where auxins are concentrated. So auxins will be concentrated here on the lower side, right? But remember, when it comes to the stem, auxins, right, they stimulate growth, right? They don't inhibit growth. I hope that makes sense. They stimulate growth, they don't inhibit growth. So it means that the lighter side or the upper side will grow faster than the lower side, causing the plant to bend away or to point away from the ground or to point away from gravity, right? So they are growing, going up, right? Opposite to gravity. Can you see they're responding differently as compared to roots? Roots are pointing or they are growing towards gravity or towards the ground, whereas the stem is growing going upwards, right, away from gravity. So we say that the stem is negative, is negatively geotropic. So we call this phenomenon where the stem is growing away from the ground or away from gravity. We say that it's negatively geotropic. So it's called negative geotropism, right? We call it negative geotropism. No, never forget that. So what is negative geotropism? It's when the stem of the plant is growing away or in the opposite direction to gravity, or is growing away from gravity. So we say that the stem is negatively geotropic. Okay, so we're done with this phenomenon. You can rewind whatever I was saying over and over again, right? If you didn't understand it. Sorry about that, guys. Apologies again. Let's look at the role of auxins in phototropism and geotropism. Let's just summarize the role, right? So what's the role of auxins in phototropism? Remember, the auxins are produced at the tip of the stem, and the auxins they move downward evenly. This happens when they're exposed to uniform light, obviously, right? They go downward evenly, right? This even distribution brings about equal growth on all sides of the stem. It will cause the stem to grow going upwards, right? Because remember, the function of the auxin is to stimulate cell elongation for the stem to grow. Okay, so when a stem is exposed to unilateral light, when it is exposed to unilateral light, so it means that the auxins will move away from the light. They'll go to the darker side because they're sensitive to light, right? Causing the darker side to grow more than the lighter side, right? So it means that the darker side will grow more, causing the stem to bend towards the light. Okay, now let's look at the role of auxins in geotropism. So remember, so with regards to auxins, in the roots, right? Auxins are produced at the tip of the roots. They are produced at the tip of the roots, right? And the auxins will move up instead of down. They move up evenly, right? Remember, in the stem they move down, but when it comes to the roots, they move up evenly, causing the stem to, causing the roots to grow going downward. Remember, the stem grows going upwards, whereas the roots they grow going downwards. So that's the difference between the roots and the stem, right? Okay. So when a root is placed horizontally, it means that the lower side, right? The lower side will have more auxins. The concentration of auxins will go to the lower side, right? Because auxins are attracted by gravity, right? And when the auxins they go to the lower side, what happens then when the auxins go to the lower side? The auxins inhibit growth on the lower side. It means that the upper side will grow more than the lower side, right? Causing the roots to bend towards gravity or to bend downwards. Okay. Okay, so these are experiments, right? These are experiments. Let's just go through these experiments, right? So this is an experiment. So in an experiment, we have a clinostat. A clinostat is a device that rotates a plant. So it rotates a plant, right? So the plant, we have one plant that is on top of a clinostat stat that is not rotating, right? So this clinostat is not rotating, right? And this one on the other side is rotating. So the clinostat is rotating this side, is rotating. Why is it rotating? To expose the plant to light, to distribute light, right, evenly throughout the plant. But this one, the reason why the clinostat is not rotating, because they want to expose the plant to unilateral light or to one-sided light, right? And this plant where the clinostat is rotating is called the control, right? So as you can see here, that they're saying the control has a clinostat that causes the pot to rotate. So the pot is rotating. So all sides of the stem are exposed to light, causing the plant to grow straight upwards. This one, the reason this one bends towards the light is because it's exposed to one-sided light. And you know what happens to the plant whenever it is exposed to one-sided light, right? So remember, in an experiment, the plant that is given a clinostat, right, that will cause it to rotate and get light throughout it, or the light or get to a point whereby light is distributed all over the stem, or the stem will be exposed to light on all sides. We call that plant the control, right? We call that plant a control. Exactly. Okay, let's look at this investigation. Okay, so these are obviously experiments showing geotropism, right? So we have a plant here, right? The control, it means that the clinostat, where is this pen now? So the control, these seeds, we can see that these are seeds that are starting to germinate, right? So they're starting to germinate. So this clinostat, right, will also rotate, distributing gravity throughout the plant. So whenever it's rotating, it's just distributing gravity, so that gravity is not heavily exposed to one side, does not influence one side heavily, right? Hence the clinostat will rotate just to get gravity to be distributed throughout the whole plant, right? So this is the experiment. So here in this plant, the clinostat is not rotating. So it means that the oxygens will diffuse to the side where there's most gravity, or where there's more gravity, right? So I hope that makes sense. So whenever they tell you with a clinostat, one plant was placed on top of a clinostat that is rotating, that plant is used as the control. Then the one that is on the clinostat that's not rotating, that's the experiment, right? That's the plant they're conducting an experiment on, just to see the effect of gravity or to see the effect of light with regards to a stem, right? Okay. Okay, these are questions. I'm sure I'll just do a question. I'll do a question. I think tomorrow, answering paper one as a whole. So I'll be doing that question, right? So I'll release a separate video where I'm doing a question. Okay. So now let's get to plant defense mechanism. So how do plants defend themselves against predators, right? So plants have adapted to prevent herbivores from eating them. So how are they protecting themselves? So they are protecting themselves through chemicals. So let's look at chemical defense. So plants produce chemicals to defend against insects, right? So they produce certain chemicals, right? Okay. And the chemicals cause the insects to mount prematurely, lose weight, and if enough is ingested, metabolic damage and death, right? So chemicals, so they prevent predators or herbivores. Herbivores, what are herbivores? Herbivores are animals that eat plants, right? So those are herbivores. Remember, in grade 10, I think it's grade 10, we learned about omnivores, herbivores, and carnivores. Okay, let's look at other defense mechanisms. Right? So other plants, they defend themselves through thorns, right? What are thorns? So these are sharp structure found on plants for protecting against herbivores, right? So these are different types of thorns. You have your prickles, right? The prickles, this is how prickles look like, right? And we have thorns. So you have these thorns. I'm sure you've seen these plants, right? Or you can have spines, right? In other plants you have spines, but they're all thorns. So plants, they protect themselves against predators through two ways: through chemicals, right? Or through what? Thorns. Okay. I think we're done, guys. I think we're done. So you can replay this video over and over again in order to understand the processes that I was explaining. Thank you, guys. Thank you.